guys. I'm super excited to be here with all of you today. I know we'll have a group on the recording, and can I just give a shout out really fast to the YouTube opportunity that you just gave to the team, guys? That is like such gold that you've got access to that type of audience. If I was in your shoes, I would jump on that immediately. I do a lot of trainings. You know, our company hosts boot camps every couple months, recruiting boot camps, 2-day events where we go deep on recruiting and systems and how to build out, recruiting and retention tools for your team. One of the things I talk about there is how big of a deal it is having a strong online brand and an online presence. So for you guys to get access to just jump in, film, and post content on a page that already has such an audience, I think is such a treat. So thank you again for having me, you guys. My topic today is going to be on how to recruit and retain badass women, because I am uniquely postured to talk about this specifically. But just so you know, everything I'm going to discuss today is really concepts that we use when we teach recruiting and retention to teams and individuals, countrywide. We don't just focus on solar. I also work in roofing and pest control and windows and alarms. And so all of this can be used across the board, but we're going to also kind of add the flavor on how to make it specific to women. So quick background just on me before I get started. So you guys that don't know me are like, who the heck is this girl? I've been in solar. This is my 10th year in the industry. So full decade, which is like being a dinosaur at this point because of how new our industry and our space is. I first got into the space because back in college, I really wanted to work in something environmental. I thought I was going to jump into some kind of nonprofit opportunity after school. And during college, I used to knock doors for a nonprofit down in Florida, where I went to school for marine biology. And I was knocking to get petitions signed, to get legislation passed, to get people to vote, all kind of surrounding solar back in 2014, before it was actually kind of prominent and moving forward in the state. I don't remember the governor at the time, but they were not pro-solar. And so that was kind of my mission at the time. And so when I got out of school and found a job where I could knock doors to actually get paid for what I was doing, I was stoked. So I already knew it was going to be a door knocking job going in. I know that, ends up being quite a turnoff for many people that get into the space if they don't also have virtual opportunities like you guys do. So I had no idea what I was getting myself into when I first got started. I was working at a company out of my home state, New Jersey, where I was the second training class that they'd ever brought on for door to door. So they'd only done paid leads and in-home sales before we came on board. And so I was the first female sales rep they hired for the company. I still remember the shirts I was given my first week. They handed me 2 white men's XL polos, and one of them had this big coffee stain right here, because you could tell they gave it to someone who quit. They took the polo back and then they repurposed it for me because they didn't have any women's gear. It was just a mess. And so hopefully many of you have had a very different onboarding and training process than I did. But back in 2014 and 2015, when I was getting into the space, being the only female on my team was an issue, because any men that were willing to take me out knocking, which honestly was not many. My manager didn't want to go knock any doors. I wasn't really getting any training. Lots of them didn't want to take a female rep out because they had either had issues at past companies where someone complained about, sexual harassment or something, and they were terrified. Or we had many LDS men on my team. And so it wasn't kosher for them to take a female rep out, if their wife wasn't there, just stuff like that. So it took me 5 weeks before I got my first sale, and even longer before I got my first paycheck, right? Probably another month out before I got my first paycheck. And so I share that story because that's really what spurred the rest of my career. And I didn't really notice it at the time, but I had really internalized all of the issues and the hardships that I had to overcome in those first couple months in the industry. And that is what has driven, me to build both my company, Shut the Fluff Up, that does consulting and training. We do courses all around recruiting and retention and sales performance practices for companies in our space. And then also this past year launched The Pride, which is a women's mentorship community specifically tailored to women in our like overarching kind of male dominated industry. That was important because, again, like my experience was actually very common for women. If you talk to a lot of girls that have gotten started, especially before the industry really started taking like retention and training practices seriously, many women had the same kind of experience that I did, where they didn't get much training, or the training they did get was really catered to men, and how, you know, men might need to stand 10 feet back from the door and look distracted and turn to the side, so they look smaller and less assuming. Whereas if a female does it, we might be looked at as the B word because we're like not paying attention and we're ignoring the homeowner when they get to the door. So we actually need to like square up and put on a smile and like be prepared for them to answer. And so anyways, I digress, but that's really what's taken me in my career. So after I got off the doors, I transitioned into director and executive level positions at 3 of the 5 largest companies at the time. My last one being director at Vivint Solar, where I got to be over the sales marketing department and run my big $5 million budget to work on how do we help reps compete? How do we get them awesome swag, marketing materials? What's our training and our onboarding process? How do we make recruiting into a sport so that we can have a strong recruiting culture, not just a sales culture? All of that stuff is really what kind of my career came about, was building that really strong rep experience. So we were recruiting better people into the space. We were able to retain those people, and then we were able to have those people perform at their highest possible level. And so since then, I transitioned into consulting. You know, we were talking, I was COO at D2D Experts for a while, and that's what kind of kicked off my speaking career. Since then, I facilitated a 4-company merger where I took chairman of the board. We had 4 clients at D2D Experts that were all in solar that wanted to merge. We did that right around, we launched ours about 2 weeks before Lumio launched and announced their merger. So they definitely did it at a bigger scale. You know, Greg Butterfield got lots more funding than my team did at the time, but I resonate with a lot of the hardships that they had to go through. Merging companies is not easy, and it was a great learning experience. So once we exited that, my husband and I were both in that, we exited successfully last year. And so we've been focused full-time on our consulting business, and I focus on the Pride as well. So again, stoked to talk to you guys today. The reason I chose this topic is it's the perfect amalgam of all of the things that I love and have passions around kind of in our space. So if you guys have questions throughout, feel free to drop them in the chat. I've got it pulled up so that if you guys need anything, have specifics, I'm happy to dive into that stuff, okay? All right, so I want to do a little exercise before I get into my training material. Now, whether you're a leader or you are a team member pursuing leadership, you know, we all have leadership qualities and all have to have a leadership presence in this industry. So I want you to look at some of these words I've put here, and I want you to choose 5 that best describe your leadership style. And I'll give you guys about 30 seconds to pick those out. Write them down if you have a notebook in front of you. This will be a good journaling opportunity. Perfect, Anthony. Thank you. I saw that. Okay, give you about 10 more seconds. Okay. So in the chat for me, I want you to let me know your split. So you've got these 2 columns on the left, 2 columns on the right of the screen. Were you 1 and 4 or 3 and 2? What did that look like for you guys? Got 1 and 4 from Anthony. 3 and 2 for Brad. Awesome. Let me see if I can see all of you at once, but quick show of hands. Did anybody get 5 and 0 or 0 and 5? Okay. I've never seen it yet. I want to always check. 2 and 4. Okay. So you guys, I bring this up because every single person, every great leader is in harmony with 2 types of energy. So harmony doesn't mean a 50-50 balance here, as that's why I chose 5, right? Even Doug, you had 6 traits that came up. You were still not 3 and 3, you were 2 and 4. I love that. So Powur, by the way, this is called, this is a principle I got from a gentleman that we've talked strongly about the kind of balance and the harmony between feminine and masculine leadership when it comes to sales. I changed up some of the words here. The way I like to frame it is masculine energy. Calling it masculine and feminine typically has whichever gender you relate to, you kind of repel the other a little bit. It feels foreign. It feels like you don't fully identify with it. That's why I like to call it power versus passion. So your power energy is traditionally masculine energy. Passion is traditionally feminine. And if you look back at these 2 columns, this side, honest, disciplined, consistent, high integrity, these are masculine traits by nature. And then on the right here, intuitive, authentic, passionate, empathetic, these are all more so kind of feminine traits. And so this concept that he developed was how having those in balance, that might be a little bit more, a little bit less for you, but you're honoring the balance between, is what gives you access to what he called gratitude energy. So that's the same as God energy, but it's this idea that the whole universe is conspiring in your favor. You, as a leader, attract homeowners and customers that are more aligned with your style. You attract recruits that better align with your personal values. Everyone that kind of gets attracted into your space when you're in harmony with these 2 personally are your people. You are attracting more and more of your people because they resonate with you. And so if any of you saw my main stage talk at SolarCon, a couple of these slides are from that. But a concept I developed is the performance matrix here. And this is really where feminine versus masculine, or power versus passion, meets high performing cultures. That's kind of where I put these 2 things together. So I have been in the industry long enough and have worked with some of the other industries like pest control long enough to know that there are still people to this day that refuse to hire women on their team because they're terrified. Brad, you mentioned that you saw some recording of my first women's panel I did when D2D had their first women's panel. And we had a gentleman ask at the end, he was like, well, I don't think that I can hire women because, I hired this woman one time and she came on board. She was always emotional. Like, she didn't mesh well with the team. She was trying to date half the guys. It was this big issue. I don't think I can hire women. And I said, it's not that you hired a woman, it's that you hired a low performer that happened to also be a woman. So looking at this matrix here, we've got our masculine or our power traits on the left. We've got our passion traits on the right, but then we've also got what would be considered low performance, or if anyone's ever looked into toxic masculinity, toxic femininity, this is where this kind of comes into play, versus healthy or high performance traits. And so the reason why you might have had a bad interaction with any recruit you've brought on board before, whether they're a man or a woman, hopefully is because they were just a low performer. They were exhibiting some of these traits. And the beauty of bringing more healthy, capable women into our industry is that we are now balancing from being more on this left side of the fence as a sales culture overall towards a more balanced, high performing culture as an industry as a whole. If you think about it, lots of our sales practices come from the Wolf of Wall Street days, where there's this nobody cares, you're going to work harder, go through the phones, you're doing drugs on the side, whatever. It's this crazy, rambunctious, very masculine culture. There were no women on the sales team. It was very masculinized. And so not only were these high performing masculine or power traits considered good, but also people put up with the aggression and being territorial and all of these things. And I've seen this even transition over my years in the industry, where when I first came on board, I remember in my office when I was selling, we were running into times where, someone had a referral, let's say, in a guy's knocking area, and that guy would get territorial as hell. He's up in arms. How could you let that person come in my hood? That's my area. Those are my customers. And we would just be like, oh, it's okay. He's just really passionate about his job. But that's the type of stuff that if you allow that to foster, it actually festers in your culture. When you have that type of behavior all the time, whether it's these low performing power traits or these low performing passion traits, either way, you are going to really drop the standard and what your team can expect out of themselves and each other, because they're fostering these low performing traits and they're saying it's okay to be that way. You know, one big thing we see a lot, again, not just with women, I see it a lot with new hires in general, is a general feeling of victimization. The whole world is out to get them. The manager's out to get them because they gave them a bad list of leads or bad knocking territory. The customers are out to get them because they're always yelling at them and they get upset and they're not dealing with the rejection well. Their spouse at home is out to get them because, you know, they're working long hours. That person doesn't understand why they're not coming home for dinner, things like that. When really the opposite of victimization is empowerment. And so I'm going to talk a little bit how the idea of empowerment is something that I like to weave into a lot of how I build out like retention systems for companies. Because ultimately that is how people, when you're empowered, you're in control. You perceive yourself as being in full control of the outcomes that are in front of you. And if you're not in control of things, you let them go. You don't let them bother you, but you take more control over what you have in front of you, the opportunity. And that is what you really want to make sure you're fostering out of new people that come onto your team. Okay, so quick couple tips on culture for women. And then I'm going to jump into my retention and recruiting kind of systems around this as well. So a couple things that I've found really stand out that helps foster these high performing women to now enter a team when maybe it was all men before, or so far, I know I've got a couple cameras off, but I can only see one woman in front of me here. So, you know, we're very male dominated here. And that's okay. There's a lot of women that would love to jump into an all male culture if the culture is set up really well to also foster what they bring to the table. So number one is you want to reward high performing behavior only. So again, going back to my matrix here, you want to make sure that your reps are exhibiting whatever kind of values out of this upper area your team personally stands by. If you have someone on board that's exhibiting any of these behaviors, especially you guys, if this is one of your top performers, if you have a very unstable top performer on your team, as a leader, you can say, oh, it's my override. That's, you know, I need them on board. They're setting an example of what high performance looks like. At the same time, they're also allowing everybody on the team to think that type of behavior is okay. With more, with great power comes great responsibility, right? The more you sell, the more influence over the team you have, whether you are a manager or you're not, because people look up to you, people want to emulate you. And so that's where I see a lot of people make a mistake. There's actually a video by Simon Sinek. If you guys have ever seen it, he talks about Navy SEALs and he's got character on, he like draws a little graph. How am I doing this on my camera? Draws a graph. One axis is performance. One axis is character. And so when you have a low performer with low character, you don't want them on your team. That's an easy no. When you have a high performer with high character, it's an easy yes. But then when you have a high performer with low character, that's who I'm talking about here. And that's what he would consider a toxic team member. So the Navy SEALs would immediately get rid of those people because although they were a high performer on the team, the influence they had over everybody else was actually taking these other people that might have had high character and letting them see that not only was that person getting away with lower kind of standards of character, but and the organization as a whole was subconsciously looked at as permitting those types of people to foster success within the organization. So moving on, you guys, that is the big one. You want to make sure you're rewarding those high performance behaviors only. Number two is take inventory of your values. So I do a lot of business consulting. That's like the highest end thing that my Shut the Fluff Up company offers. And when we do that with the team, we're like coming in as satellite executives to the team and helping them build all of this from the ground up. Like we're in the trenches with them. So a common thing I run into with companies, you'd be surprised, is they're like, Alex, make me look cool. Give me all the cool stuff you did at Vivint. help me with the competition, give me some cool gear. What's it going to take? And I'm like, perfect. We got to start with your culture. What do you guys value? And they're like, I don't know. We want high performers. We want, people. It's always very like, generalized, if anything. And so it's better to stand for something than stand for everything and therefore nothing. Right. So, you may be cool with all of the behaviors on here up top. Right. But I encourage you guys to really look into, when I'm recruiting people, when I'm attracting people into my organization, what are the values here that I truly stand by? Who are the types of people that I want to attract in? Because, even going back to the opportunity you guys have to jump on the YouTube channel, if you talk about how you want high performers, you want great people on your team, it's harder for someone to subconsciously identify with that being them. It's a lot easier when you say, we only want people that are passionate about what they do. We want people that are disciplined. We have, we do a lot of accountability practices at our organization. We love holding each other accountable to, whatever workout challenges, healthy eating challenges, whatever it's going to be. But if you guys choose a couple of these that really resonate with you and what you personally value, I guarantee it's going to stand out more, and it's going to attract people with a little bit of a stronger like emphasis into your organization. Number 3 is be open to multiple paths of success. So, when people reference the gender gap, the gender pay gap, I don't really subscribe to a lot of the glass ceiling kind of stuff. I think that's a self-perpetuated like victimization sort of thing that women have had put on them when it comes to their career. So when I look at the pay gap, I don't think it's this thing that women have to just like sit and deal with and be, again, a victim of forever. I like to take the empowerment stance, which is, we are capable of, equal pay across the board. What could come into play that can set women back, though, is if younger women start off their career and then they take time off to have children. And then they're trying to jump back into their career, or they're trying to juggle being a mom and having their job. And so that pay can come from the fact that just, you don't have as much time, or you've got a big gap in your career experience. And so many, many women in this space are super successful being moms, coming in and doing solar. I think one of you guys, when we were just chatting before the call, even mentioned that, how like some of the girls on your team are the biggest badasses. And it's like, yeah, I take care of my 3 kids at home, and then I go out and sling solar at night. Like, that is absolutely a thing that can happen. But being open to, a woman coming onto your team and hiring that person, knowing they're in their late 20s or early 30s and might be wanting to have kids soon, like knowing that that's okay and that there are multiple ways that people can have success here, I think is super, super important. Number 4, massive need for an emphasis on ethics. So, ethics is huge. And I notice women sniff out unethical behavior a lot quicker. So if you've don't have many women on the team, or you got your first woman being introduced to a team, and that team is doing some weird stuff where they're running a dead person's name on, the paperwork, or permit poaching and all the fun things in our industry, right? Women will sniff that ish out, and they will not come on board to your company. They won't put up with it. They'll be like, why are we doing this? This is really weird. This sounds terrible. Why would I do this to a customer? And if you don't have an ethical response to it, I see a lot of women just say, nope, this company is not for me. So make sure you guys have a strong emphasis on ethics. In fact, that can be an attractor of women if you talk about that in your recruiting process and kind of your general marketing techniques for bringing on recruits. Number 5 is invest in female mentorship. So again, I mentioned that we started the Pride community for women in our space because there's kind of this gap where there's not a ton of women that have succeeded at a tremendously high level and are then available to give their time to up and coming women in the space to teach them what they needed to learn along the way. So it's kind of to try to connect a lot of those women together. Me and my co-founder, Lindsay, do quite a bit of coaching ourselves. We run several of the calls, but we also bring in a lot of guests, and we foster a lot of mentorship between the women that are in the organization. So, if you just get started in sales, maybe there's a woman like Suli Zink who's been in sales a really long time, and you can get some time with her. So invest in that female leadership. Also, because women deal with different mental roadblocks than men do traditionally. Men, what I've noticed is men are a lot better at dealing with rejection than women. Maybe that's because you guys are really good at, like, in college, you were going out, hitting on girls at bars, and you'd hit on like 20 girls before someone would say yes. Meanwhile, if I hit on a man in a bar and he didn't want to like talk to me, I'd probably be devastated for 2 weeks and not talk to any other boys and like be completely embarrassed. And that's just some of our upbringing, right? Like that's just one of those differences I've noticed. Another thing that comes up is how we deal with the highs and lows of the industry, right? We all know what the roller coaster feels like. So the emotions that women might feel and the way they deal with those emotions to get back on the saddle are a lot different than men. So I hear, oftentimes women that I work with talk about how their male boss was like, rub some dirt in it, just go back out there. It's not a big deal. Like, just go, get back out there, get back out there. And she's like, no, man, I need to talk about it. I need a sounding board. I need to feel like you're like validating my feelings right now. So because those things are a little different, I encourage you guys to invest in some type of female mentorship, whatever that looks like. Number 6 is train on safety. So something I say often is most women feel safe most of the time, knocking doors, going to, in-person appointments. But that doesn't mean they feel safe all of the time. And that doesn't mean they are safe all of the time. I had a gentleman, I was on a podcast with a dear friend, Eric Obrent. So if you guys were at RoofCon, you saw Eric, I'm sure. He runs Be Authentic or GTFO. And I was his first female guest, and we were talking about this, and I brought up safety, and he was like, dude, I've never even thought of that. That's crazy. Because he's a 6'3" guy that's never really felt super unsafe on the doors. And then I also had another gentleman that I'm dear friends with in the industry say, well, Alex, if you bring up safety during training and recruiting and stuff, aren't women going to suddenly be like, oh my gosh, wait, I'm going to be unsafe in this job and have it as a turnoff? And my answer was absolutely not, because every single female applying for that job has felt unsafe walking down the road at night, whatever, like that stuff happens all the time. So we are aware of it already. The fact that a leader or a trainer is bringing that up and saying, hey, not only are we aware that might happen to you, but we've got a protocol on how to make you feel safer on the doors, in the homes. And then if anything was to ever happen, we know exactly how to handle that with you. That is such a great attraction for women coming on board. And then lastly is buy some cool women's gear. There's a lot of good options these days. I see a lot of like tennis skirts, tennis dresses, like nice, better female fitting tops, things like that. I work with a lot of women that prefer unisex clothes. I work with a lot of women that will go as far as to wear heels on the doors, like whatever your preference is. Having some options for women coming on board so they don't get stuck with the men's XLT with the coffee stain is always a plus, in my opinion. Okay, now I want to talk about retention with you guys for a second, because again, this is something across the board. It's going to work not just with women, but with anyone that you bring on board. Retention can come down to an equation. It is not that difficult. It is support plus success divided by speed. So the more support and success you can give a new hire in the least amount of time possible, that is what's going to give you the highest chance of retaining that person. So what do I mean by those 3 terms? Support, I've got a handful of things we could go into here, but support means having a clear training program and having clear expectations on what you're looking for and when, right? Like you guys might know if a rep that's been here for 6 months, if they do, less than 2 sales a month or something, they're on a performance plan. Well, it might be a little different for your new hires. But I often see companies not set a standard for how the new hire should be performing, because they're like, oh, you're not full-time yet. I don't want to put any pressure on you. But then we get 3 or 4 weeks in, that person doesn't have a sale. They're not putting a lot of effort in. And now you're having like weird conversations for the first time. And if that's the first time you're bringing up expectations, you've done yourself and that person a disservice. And now that first conversation being a month in when they're already frustrated might kind of be the start of their downfall. Obviously, mentorship is a huge thing. So that doesn't only need to come from the manager. Oftentimes when I'm working with a team, we implement something called the mentor program, where it's basically like a pre-leadership stage where someone who knows the sales system very well can jump in and train new hires, just on how to close their first couple deals. That doesn't mean they're getting an override and having to deal with people quitting and hiring and firing and recruiting conversations and all that stuff for management. It just means they're helping the new hires get up to speed. Mental and emotional support. So just like I mentioned, this can be a little bit different for men and for women, but across the board, we all need emotional support when it comes to this job. Sometimes I bucket that and the mentorship role together, where I say, whoever's the assigned mentor, your job is also to check in with that person. It's not just to help them close their deals, but it's to be that person that they can call at the end of a bad day and say, hey, I feel really shitty today. I had all these things happen. Like I had this person slam the door in my face. I went through 3 presentations and they all said I need to think about it. Like I'm feeling low. Having that person also be able to be kind of a shoulder to lean on is important. Pro tip as well, you guys, if you're both hiring from like personal recruiting sources, like friends of a friend or whatever, and hiring from online ads, like complete strangers to you guys, the mentor program is basically like trying to give this stranger from the internet the feeling of them being a personal recruit. It's the same thing. Like if I personally recruited a friend to come into my organization, if they were having a bad day, I'd be damned if I wasn't on the phone with them. I'm going to make sure I'm going to go out with them. Like I'm going the extra mile for that person on top of their manager. It's basically like we're giving that type of feel to a new hire that doesn't have any personal connection on the team. And then last is, this is a little like cheat code we use too, is putting together a one-on-one onboarding step. So this is after they've accepted a verbal job offer with the team, but before they come in for their first day of training. This is like when they're in their paperwork signing phase. I like to bring people in and do a 15 to 30-minute meeting with them where I've got like a 10-step checklist where I'm basically going through with them all the things that don't come up during recruiting, but do need to be spoken about before they show up to their first day. And this dramatically changes the number of people that accept my offer and actually show up to training. Many times people get paperwork and they get it in their email. And especially if you hire someone that's never been 1099 or they're younger, right? They've never even really seen an employment contract. They're looking at a non-compete and all of that scary legal jargon, and they might get spooked. At Vivint Solar, we had like so much drop off during that onboarding stage that when we put this in place, we were actually able to bring another 250 reps on board every year just from this one step, is having a one-on-one onboarding where they're filling out their paperwork in person. It's the same thing as, you guys probably wouldn't say your first step or your first priority is to send a contract to a homeowner and be like, let me know when you're done with it. Right? You want to walk them through that contract so they know exactly what they're signing. They're comfortable with it. If they have questions, you're there to answer it. We also talk about, when do you get paid? Who are your contacts at the company? How do we get you into training? What's your office address? All the little like logistical things that someone might, before they show up to their first day, they might be like, oh my gosh, I don't feel prepared. And they get that anxiety kind of kick in and they suddenly don't show up to your first day. We talk about all that stuff. So that one-on-one onboarding is huge. Now for success. Another thing I loved about working at the big companies was we had a lot of data. I had over 10,000 data points of new hires that I was able to kind of sift through in order to get some really powerful statistics for the industry that ended up holding true as I got into small business consulting. So this works with any size team. But one benchmark we found was if reps get 5 or more sales in their first 60 days, they're 80% more likely to stick with that company for 6 months or longer. And so that was built off of a direct model, meaning they were doing the entire sale process. Lead generation and closing were both on their plate. If you are ever hiring for just appointment setters, my like kind of sweet spot that I found is 5 sales in the first 4 to 5 weeks. So it's a little bit different, but same kind of mentality. Another thing here that's huge is making sure they have a tight bond with the team. So if you guys do a lot of remote work, this could be if you've got local meetups and you guys are able to get together in person, that could be huge. Getting that happening like within the first week or 2 of someone coming on board, or having them get a chance to like introduce themselves on your calls. having several one-on-one touches, especially if you can do them over Zoom so they can see your face, things like that can make them feel like they're tighter bonded to the team. And someone who feels a tight bond with their team is always less likely to quit in the face of adversity. And then 3 is having a very clear roadmap to win. So if my new hire program is 5 sales in 5 weeks or 5 sales in 60 days, I like to give those new hires a like week by week checklist of things I want them to accomplish. So it's not just, did you make a sale? Yes or no. It's, did you have the right number of homeowner interactions every day to set yourself up for success? Did you listen to all the training material? Did you, do a check-in with your manager? All these kinds of things that could lead, like it's the practices that they do in those first few weeks. It's not just the sales, but it's those other practices that can show you as maybe their leader. If they don't have any sales 5 weeks in, like I did, but I was showing up to every meeting, I did every training, I was learning all the time. Those people you want to take a chance on, right? If someone's just not engaged, they're not doing anything, and they're not getting sales, they might not be worth keeping on board. In fact, the more people you have on your team that aren't producing, it's going to, again, kind of lower the standard of your team because everyone's going to see that you as the leader are okay with mediocrity. The third thing is speed. So not only is it important to get those 5 sales in 60 days, kind of as my benchmark, but I've also done a ton of data since then and found that you want to have your first paycheck, so first sale, earned by day 9 if it's an appointment setter, and day 13 if they're a full, setter, closer, direct rep. So basically get that first paycheck, get that first sale within the first 2 weeks. If you think about that mentality too, let's say you hire someone from Starbucks or the gym or a retail store or something, they're likely getting pay every 2 weeks. So they don't need cash in their bank account in 2 weeks necessarily, but if they know they've already earned something within 2 weeks, that can mentally kind of keep them engaged and make them feel like they're staying on track and not falling behind. We also say treat it like it's finals week in college. So that's my husband who I work alongside. That's his like famous quote that he tells to every new hire when they come on board. But it's this idea of getting your reps in. If someone comes on board and they ease into this job where they show up to the meetings, but they don't want to talk to that many people because they don't feel prepared yet, and they learn and they learn and they learn, they're going to know so much and have such few actual repetitions in front of homeowners that their learning curve gets extended. The shorter that you can make the learning curve by getting, like you can shorten the learning curve by getting more and more reps into a smaller period of time. A couple quick questions I often get with lady reps that I want to mention before I talk about some recruiting, and then I'm going to finish up here. I know I'm going long, so thank you guys. I get a lot of women say, I feel like I don't have any balance. That kind of goes with number 2, which is I'm not good at setting boundaries. Many people, I think women especially, because a lot of women have their hard work, like their value somewhere is tied to the work that they put in. That's like kind of a mental thing, a pattern I notice with many women. They're not great at setting boundaries in a 1099 position. Anyone that feels like if I give it my all, that's how I know I've done enough, can often spend a lot of time thinking about this job, considering going out to work, but not a lot of hours being where your feet are. Going in, thinking about work when you're working, thinking about home when you're home. When you're there, you're going all in, you're doing the most important, most productive behaviors while you're out in the field or out selling. That's what I mean by that. So it's good to, another thing I like to do for new hires is give them an actual new hire schedule. Again, if you're hiring 1099, I always say, I can't require you to work this schedule. And by no means am I asking you to definitely work this, but you came on board to my team because you know that I've got a good roadmap for success and I'm going to help you get to that kind of high earning potential. This is what I would suggest for you over the first couple of weeks. Here's how I would split up my time if I was you. Follow it or don't. It's not up to me. It's up to you, but here's a tool for you. That is something I think is super, super powerful. Another thing is maybe they had a weird interaction with a man. Last summer, I was the women's coach for Hawks Pest Control. They had 1,300 reps on board, and just for stats here, they had 80 women, 80 women out of 1,300 hires. So it was about 93% men. And the ladies on the teams, we did weekly Zoom calls and everything. Man, oh man, did I get inundated with personal calls from their managers the first couple weeks with weird interactions on the doors and all of this kind of stuff. And that ties back into the safety thing I mentioned before. You don't just want to help women feel safe ahead of time. By the way, I've got some free webinars that I've recorded, had other awesome women out on the doors kind of jump into that stuff. So if I can give you guys that as a resource, you can have access to that. It's not just that, but you also want to know how to handle that afterwards. It's this very delicate, different for every person mixture of validating what happened and how they feel about what happened, and trying to help them shorten the amount of time between incident and getting back in the saddle. The longer they stew in feeling like, oh my gosh, something happened, this guy brought me into their house and then locked the door behind me and was like standing between me and the door, and I had to kind of shimmy my way out. It got weird. Like stuff like that happens all the time. But if that sits in their brain and they just ruminate on it for a long time, they may just never get back out. So I would always volunteer extra time with that person to personally go out with them for many days until they feel comfortable again doing their job consistently. Maybe they're struggling with mindset. Like I mentioned, men and women struggle with different mindset challenges. Many are the same, some of them are different. So knowing how to handle that, or again, having more senior females in your company or in the industry be able to kind of lend a hand on that stuff, I think is valuable. Many women, I see this in men too, but women often deal with imposter syndrome, which is the idea that the success you have is all a fluke. Oh yeah, I did get a sale in my first week. It's a fluke. It just was an accident. Oh, I've gotten a sale every week since I started and I'm 6 weeks in. Oh, it's not me. I just stumbled over this. It's this constant feeling like the success you had is not indicative of future success. So that's another mindset thing women struggle with. Another is not feeling important or recognized on the team. So many women specifically like, what is the love language? Words of affirmation is a big one. So being able to either, whether it's in public because they like public praise or private, always kind of knowing how your sales reps respond to public versus private praise is awesome. Being able to kind of give that to them. And it's not just when they do sales and everything. By the way, shout out to you guys as leadership for going through and doing those shout outs at the beginning of the call. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Many companies I work with don't do that type of thing. They don't realize the impact it can have, but doing that stuff helps tremendously. And again, training can feel like it's for guys. So it's not quite positioned to fit their personality or how they would handle situations. And so the thing that I would recommend is if you've got training material and you ever feel like it doesn't fit one of the team members that is learning from that material, connect more with not the what, like the actual application of the training that you're giving to them. Like, here's a door pitch. I would teach them why that thing exists. Like, what's really the root intention behind this training material that we have? For example, I gave that door knocking example in the beginning where women shouldn't stand 10 feet back and turn to the side and pretend they're busy on their phone or whatever. They might need to square up. The reason for that training is to make sure the person that's on the doors looks approachable, to not spook the homeowner, especially if it's a woman home alone or whatever, right? If that's the intention, you can teach women to understand the intention of that training and then apply it differently to make it match their specific style. And again, that helps across the board. If you have like an introvert learning from an extrovert training program or vice versa, it's always helpful to kind of understand the intention behind that training. Okay, so I want to teach real fast on value-based recruiting, you guys. So recruiting is about them and what they want. It's not about you. Value-based recruiting is this idea that you can understand a person's values at the beginning of a recruiting conversation and slightly tweak your recruiting conversations and your interview to match what they specifically want. For example, if you are hiring someone and their main core motivator for their job is that they love the fact that, like me, like I didn't care about money. I was an environmental girl, I wanted to fix the planet. I wanted to serve the earth. So I'm coming in. That's what I care about. If my interviewer was just talking the whole time about how, dude, you can make 6 figures here. You're going to be rich. You're going to do awesome. I would have been super turned off and I probably wouldn't have taken the job. And so that's what I mean by value-based recruiting, is understand what that person values so you can tweak your conversation. You guys already do this, by the way, when you sell. So when you sell, you're probably asking, hey, like, did you have any specific questions you want me to address in my presentation before we get started? I bet you guys are doing a little bit of discovery before you kick off your sales presentation. It's the exact same thing, my friends. So you're finding out what matters the most to them, what their biggest hangups might be. And then you might have already planned to weave that into your presentation, but now you know, oh, they're planning on moving in 6 months. Now, when I get to the spot, when I address the moving objection, I'm going to really make sure it's custom to them. And I'm going to sit on that until I know they understand it and they feel good about it. Same exact thing with value-based recruiting. So, this list is simplified, right? There's like a million priorities that could fit into each of these, but generally, when choosing a sales job, here are some of the main priorities people have. So what is the compensation and benefits? What type of security or consistency will I have with this job? What type of support or training is offered? Do I believe in that product, right? Why would I choose solar over Cutco? What is the career growth I can have at this company? And then what sort of purpose or impact am I going to have at the business? And is the business going to have on the industry? Let me shut my window a little bit. Hold on, you guys. Okay, that's better. So the priority list, and again, this is not the same for every man and for every woman, but it's generally kind of what I end up seeing, is men care a lot about what's our compensation, the benefits going to look like. Am I going to have a lot of career growth? And then they start getting into wanting security and support, believing in the product and kind of impact overall. This is closely aligned with the fact that people with a tremendous amount of testosterone in their system oftentimes are willing to take more risks. So they're willing to go after higher earning potential positions, things that have career growth, because it could be more risky, but higher reward versus some of this other stuff. And generally, women do not prioritize the exact same things. Going back to kind of our chemical makeup, generally women want more security, safety, support. They want to feel really good about what they're selling. That kind of sometimes takes precedence. And again, you can go through by really figuring some of this stuff out before you even jump into your recruiting conversations. Or better yet, when it comes to determining your values and making sure your recruiting material or what you post online is aligned with your values, people that come to you on social media when you're constantly talking about what you value are likely already going to be aligned with some of the stuff on here. So you can figure some of this out even before you start the recruiting conversation based on who you attract into your recruiting pipeline. Women generally also, I've noticed, kind of follow, this is like this 4S framework for really making sure the recruiting and the retention systems drive home the most important points for women. And it's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So the bottom of the pyramid is most important, and then you work your way upward. So women want to feel safe, not just how they are physically feel safe, but I'm going to talk about psychological safety in a second too, because that's a concept I've noticed not many people in our industry know about, but is super important to your team and your culture. Next is security. So this could be, you can help people feel secure during your interview and your recruiting process by talking about how they can be consistent in their job. So if they're getting offered a commission-only position, that can easily feel insecure. There's not a lot of consistency to commission only, right? There's not a base with it. However, you can help them know, hey, I have this schedule, I have this roadmap that we give to every new hire. If you follow this roadmap and you follow my schedule, I guarantee it's going to drive consistency with the contacts you make, the number of sales or presentations you do, the number of sales you get. It's going to drive that consistency. And ultimately, when you want a base, what you really want is consistency. So if I can help give you consistency through giving you these tools when you first come on board to drive consistent behavior and therefore consistent results and commissions, Would that feel about the same as getting a base salary? Stuff like that, you guys, will 10 out of 10 times help someone shift out of that, oh, I can only do this job if I get a base. So talking about consistency is important there. Number 3 is feeling supported. So this is when I would go hard on the training systems that you guys have, coaching opportunities, all that kind of stuff. And I know Powur has a ton of that. So you guys have all the resources in the world, which is awesome. Make sure that you guys talk about that if you know the person you're recruiting cares a lot about having support. And then lastly, people want to be seen when they come into your organization. If you're recruiting people that share similar values to you, hopefully they already feel this way, but people want to be around people they feel see them their true selves and like them as they are, right? So anything you can do, these little touch points, giving shout outs at the beginning of meetings, stuff like that helps people feel seen for who they are and the effort they're putting into this job. And just to touch real fast before I wrap up on what psychological safety is, I mentioned that before. So there's physical safety, which we've talked about. Psychological safety is also important, but it's this feeling of fostering belonging with people that work for you. It's this idea that you're safe to speak up. If you share ideas in a meeting or things like that, they're going to be seen as valuable, and people are not going to just put you down if you put out suggestions. There are ways that you can drive people to feel like they belong through 3 main types of cues. So one is energy. Energy could be as simple as if someone's walking into a meeting or something like that, addressing them, giving them a high five, giving them a hug, whatever it's going to be, transferring your energy. Individualization means giving them individual attention. So that can be saying hi to everyone by name when they join the Zoom or they come into the meeting. That could be doing the shout outs like you guys did at the beginning of this call. And then future orientation too. So if a new hire that's not having a good first week is, feeling a lot of doubt, and you guys, let's say you have a monthly meetup at Topgolf, and every month you guys, the whole team goes to Topgolf, you guys go have fun. Well, that person, if you're like, oh man, like our next Topgolf week is in 3 weeks, I can't wait for you to come, like we do this and da 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 da. Talking about future events that you guys are going to have together helps that person feel like you're not trying to get rid of them in the next couple of days, right? Like they feel a sense of belonging, like they're going to stick longer term. Okay, you guys, that was a lot of information. I am so happy for everyone that was able to stick with me throughout. I'm happy to take questions now. And just so you know, the QR code that I have here, if you guys like this training, if more women's stuff or retention and recruiting and sales performance stuff is what y'all need, we've got a lot of options at Shut the Fluff Up, but I'm not trying to sell you anything today. I just have a QR code here for anyone that would want to hop into our free community. So we do weekly calls with me, Brandon, and a million other industry experts, many that you've had on our calls here too, but many others as well. We talk about really anything and everything around these 3 pillars. And so all of our recordings are in there. Many courses from Brandon and myself are in there. If that can be of value to you guys, I encourage you to jump into the No Fluff Zone. And that's it for today. I'll take some questions.
Hi, Alexandra. This is Brad. I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. This is a great training. Thank you. And I'm so impressed with you when hearing your story about how you didn't get a sale when you first started the industry and you were working 14 hours a day, knocking doors, trying to get opportunities. And so that's impressive. That inspires me. But I have interviewed some women and men, and I do sometimes notice this difference because if you're familiar with Powur, no one's providing us leads. We kind of have to find our own opportunities.
Yeah.
And when I've talked to men, a lot of times I'll say, well, here's what we need to do. We need to find opportunities. And I'll say, you can door knock, you can, you can go and buy online leads, or you can go and do a home show or whatever, different options. Like, okay, I could do that. I could do that. And a lot of times I'll talk to women who they're very, very well polished in their communication, excellent communication skills, very, funny, whatever, like very good traits as far as selling. But what I'll say is like, so how do I get the opportunities? They'll ask me. And I say, well, you have to go out and find your own. You have to go out and, knock doors or do it. And they're like, I don't know. Like they kind of don't like the idea. And also maybe the commission only thing, like you were saying earlier, I think for men, like, okay, I can make this happen, you know, and a lot of times women, they like you're saying, they want to feel secure. So trying to get past I don't know if I really want to have to find my own opportunities. I don't know if I really want to commission only. That seems like it's sometimes a stumbling block when I try to recruit women. What do you think about that?
And just to clarify, are they across the board, like anything they'd have to do to find their own leads, they're acting as a turnoff, or is it door to door specifically that seems to be a turnoff?
I don't want to generalize for all women, but in my experience, it seems like in general, you know what I mean? And I know women have closer relationships with people at, you know, people at church, friend groups, whatever, that they can talk to about this. And they probably feel less hesitant to want to share with friends than maybe men do, because there's maybe an ego there with men sometimes, I think, but women are okay with that in a way that men maybe aren't sometimes. But I would say in general is kind of the response. They don't want to have to find opportunities that they probably would close them if they had the opportunities given, but it's not always something that they want to look into. So
Yeah.
again, I'm not trying to generalize, but this is what I've experienced in my recruiting. So I just wanted to see if you had any ideas to get past that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, a lot of times you guys do this in sales too, right? So this is going to feel familiar, but you get an objection. You're going to ask, well, why is that? Why do you feel that way? Can I ask why? And you're going to kind of why them into getting to the root of the issue. And that root issue, Brad, is very likely one of the 6 things I put up as the core motivators why you would take a sales job. So the same way you might why someone or kind of get through to the core objection in sales until it's one of your main objections. Like because for example, if you said, oh, once you go out and find your own leads and everything, and they're like, oh, that doesn't sound great. If you tried there to say, oh, it sounds like you really value consistency, and then start going off on how this job can be consistent, they're not going to connect the dots. You want that person to lead themselves into their own answer, right? So you're going to ask them, okay, well, why is that? Have you had experience at a company before where you had to do that and it was bad, or kind of what's the situation? And she might be like, well, I've never had to get my own leads. I'm new to sales. I haven't had to do that before. So I'm not super confident, I could jump right into it. And then you can say, well, why is that? Do you feel like maybe you didn't have the support, or are you worried about having the right tools to help you learn a new technique like this? And they might be like, no, I think I'm confident about learning. I'm good at picking things up quickly. I just think, the idea of me having to go out and get leads, I've just never done it. So I don't know how I would find them often enough or get enough to really get things going. So you
Maybe it's
see,
like self questions about their creativity or their experience. I don't have experience doing that or whatever. So it's like almost like a self doubt. Like, I don't know if that's really comfortable for me to do that. Right? Is that what you're saying?
well, yeah, and that self-doubt is generally going to lead them into feeling like they're not capable of being consistent because they're lacking the knowledge. So you can then go into how Powur provides all of this tremendous training material. You could even do the feel, felt, found kind of thing. Oh, I talk to many people that come on our team that might not have experience with that. And actually, because of that, we have a ton of training material and support on how to teach you how to go out and use these different channels in order to source your own leads. And it's actually not as hard as it sounds, right? As soon as you kind of understand the underlying concept, you can get creative, and there's all kinds of different ways. In fact, I'll teach you some of the most high impact ones that you can learn to drive consistency and make sure you're never feeling like you don't have the resource to find new leads. But you will also then be able to do what makes the most sense for your skill set. Let me ask you this. Are you really connected to any community? Like, are you in church or anything like that? And now you're getting them to talk about their networks. And it's like, perfect. I actually have someone on the team that their main way that they find leads is they do church presentations and they talk to different, communities around and and we've got resources for that. And so it's really just helping them break down and say out loud why they feel like they're not interested in taking a job that doesn't provide leads, and then helping them understand that it's actually not going to be that tough for them to get engaged with that process.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
That's awesome. If no one else has a question, just to kind of fill in time, So one of the reps, he private messaged me. I don't know why he didn't put it on the public, but he said, dude, this is the best, all in caps, training we've ever had. And we've had some big names do training with us. So, and this particular rep, it's kind of like, when you go to the movies and there's 4 or 5 trailers, and after each trailer, you're like, that looks good, that was bad, or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Towards the end of each training or in the middle of training, he usually private message me like, this is whatever. This is what this. Yeah, you got him.
He's the team
So
critic. All
yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah,
Good to
yeah. So
know.
we kind of, cheese him in the background together.
That's
But
great. I'm
this was
happy I was able
phenomenal.
to provide value for you guys. Thanks again for having me on.
Yeah, we love it for sure.